All right, we are live. We are live. We're rolling a little bit differently today. I don't have my sidekick with me, Snuffy G, but we do have a special guest sitting in, someone who I've connected with years ago. So I'm glad that we get a chance to do this. We'll talk about that more in a little bit, but first I want to jump on Instagram, let people know that we're here. Um, we're doing this really on LinkedIn and YouTube. That these are the only two places we'll be able to find this live. So if you're on Instagram and only following on Instagram, you might miss it. So we need to let everybody know um, that we are officially alive now. All right. Hey, we just started our live. We're talking with Sam Milton of Climate Resources Group this time. So jump on LinkedIn or YouTube to catch it. We're going live there right now, noon EST. See you there. Boom. And that's done. Multitasking. um, yeah, and I, want to give people a few minutes to see the notifications, get into the room, get settled. We're going to be talking about sustainability, what that means to the cannabis industry, what that means to me and my guest Sam Milton. Um, Sam and I, we ran into each other. When he comes on, we'll get clarity on this because I met Sam probably I would guesstimate about 2017 or 2018 at one of these trade shows or some event that we were doing at a cannabis event. And we had a really good conversation off the bat. I remember that Sam was one of the first people that actually shared a kind of a common concern about climate and how that would impact the industry. And back in 2017, 2018, no one was talking about, climate. Not that much. It was more about regulations, policy, financing, and who's going to be first. who's going to be first. But now that we've been, states have been operating, cannabis cultivation facilities have been operating for several years now, especially out here in the Northeast on the East Coast. They're starting to experience what it's like to actually operate the business and not just start the business. So things are changing, and people's, ideas of what's important to them. How can they, reduce costs, you know, increase their bottom line? They're going to have to start looking at things that they didn't look at when they first jumped into the industry. So very exciting times. And I remember when I was talking to Sam, um, I think I said something about solar panels. We were talking about solar panels and how, it would be great to see people that could, be able to use solar panels, switching to solar panels and kind of coming off the grid, reducing their carbon footprint, etc. But I think I said to Sam something along the lines of what happens when you have hurricanes and some of these places that are getting all these solar panels, they're putting them on the roofs, or they might live in locations that are prone to hail. So solar panels are good, but what about that other thing, that environmental climate impact on some of these pieces of equipment? And he got it right away. He was like, yeah, duh, like we need to think about that too. Um, so I appreciated that conversation, and I think that's why he kind of got pinned in my mind in my file. um, so yeah, we're gonna bring Sam on. But before we do that, just a couple of housekeeping things here on the Trella side. Before we really get into it, in case I forget, we are going to be doing another live event this week. This Thursday, I'm doing a pitch Q&A. Trella Technologies is open to public investment. We've been doing that, since 2019. We are financially backed by the community. They are the bulk who invest in us and the co-founders. So we are continuing with that opportunity. So now is a good time to check out our offering, become an investor. We use a platform called WeFunder. So I'll drop a link to that in the chat before you go, but you could also check us out at Trella.io, Trella, Trella.io, to see more about that. I'll put, if you want to attend this live session, you do have to sign up for it. Save a spot. We're going to be doing a Zoom session and sending out a Zoom link. So to make sure you get that Zoom link, please click this link. I just dropped it in the chat. On the YouTube side of things, you'll be able to see it. On LinkedIn, you might not be able to see it, but if you go to Trella Technologies, you'll see we have an event posted there. and you can get that information. So we're going to do a live pitch, and it's not a short pitch. We don't do things, the typical way. I think it's really difficult to get a sense of a company in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So we're going to do, about 45 minutes of pitching and then opening up for Q&A, and we'll get all those questions answered. So be sure to check that out. Yeah, let's bring Sam on. Sam Milton of Climate Resources Group. I will add you to the stream, get rid of some of these banners. There you are.
Hi, Asia.
All right. Yeah, Sam, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining this afternoon, and sharing that article on Canvas Business Times. It was a really great article. But before we jump into like the nitty gritty and start nerding it up, why don't you share a little bit about who you are, and what brought you to this industry in particular, if you can.
Yeah, sure. And first, Asia, thanks for inviting me on to have this chat with you. Congratulations for all this, the work that you've done. I mean, I've been watching Trella over the years, and you kind of teased how long we've known each other. But it's been so cool to kind of to see your company grow and all the work that you put into it. You're getting out there and kind of making it big. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's a labor of love.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm sure. And I know how hard you work because you're impossible to get a hold of.
Yeah.
The fact that you have time, for this and to connect with your audience is really cool too. So that's important. But you're not doing that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But no, I think we met first. It was around the very beginning. It was before Massachusetts, the rules were put in place. And I think there was a kind of a quasi trade association that came up. Can you see me okay?
Yep, I can see you fine.
Cool. All right. That was just a black screen. Yeah. And I remember it was a small room. It was in a hotel, I think it was in Newton. It was in Newton Sheraton, kind of right over the I-90, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do they call that part? Newton Corner, I think it was, or Newton Center.
Yep.
And I remember sitting there, it was kind of a packed crowd, and you walked in and people were like, Asia. I was like, who is this woman? I gotta go over there and say hi. But and we've been going around the room and saying what's up and what was important. And I felt like they're definitely the odd duck there, saying like, hey, this is awesome that this industry is growing, that we're, the state's going to be regulating this industry for the first time, at least, at the adult use level. But let's just make sure, we do it in a way that, doesn't create more problems than we intend, especially on the environmental side. Right. So I've been kind of leading with that because I think it's, it's important to be thinking about, the future, right? I mean, the world that we leave our children and grandchildren. It's not enough to say, hey, yeah, I'm not throwing, trash and, out of the window, my car. So I'm good.
I'm good. Yeah.
But we have to kind of think bigger than that. But I mean, so for me, I was, thinking about the cannabis industry, not just in terms of the enormous opportunity that having this new and exciting and kind of dynamic industry that provides really important services, but products to people, medicine to help them, feel better and kind of relieve, issues that people working on, and it's also a little bit fun too. But with that, we have to be responsible. Think about, all right, what does it mean to be creating a product that is basically grown primarily indoors, right? I know Massachusetts has been trying to help people grow outdoors. Some of the regulations around pesticide use actually make that more difficult than it should be. We can get into that. But yeah, basically the cannabis bought and sold in Massachusetts is grown indoors in warehouses, where nature has to be created through mechanical means, which generally kind of requires a lot of power inputs. So, so you're thinking about, the potential, the demand for cannabis product in the state, and this is the same story as across the country too, right? But thinking about the demand and the supply that's going to have to be created to meet that demand, just creates, you're looking at a massive amount of infrastructure that's going to be built to create, the energy, to power these plants. I'm not new power plants necessarily, but infrastructure within the buildings. So new fixtures, new HVAC, all that stuff, and it adds up. So I want to help. I'm going to help my customers, and I'm going to help the industry find ways to actually increase their profits, remain in business while their profits kind of get squeezed because of their other operating costs. Help folks do better by growing more with less. So yeah, it's an amazing ride. I love it. I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yeah. And you were doing this before cannabis, so this has kind of been your wheelhouse. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I don't know how far back you want to go, but yeah, my background is in energy policy. So before I kind of hung out my own shingle at Climate Resources Group, I was working for a company that basically managed the Mass Save energy efficiency program. So if you go to a hardware store and buy a light bulb, or you want to have your house insulated, the company I worked for, Cultivation Services Group, which then became Clear Result, administered that all on the back end. So I was doing the regulatory and legislative kind of side of that for the Northeast. So I would attend different legislative events at state houses across the Northeast, listen to their energy efficiency advisory councils, where all the sausage is made in terms of what sort of programs the state wants to offer, the utilities want to offer customers to become more efficient. And I'll go to these meetings, and it's crazy. So the utilities in a lot of these states have tens of millions of dollars that they're budgeted for just to give away to customers, residential customers, for light bulb rebates, for insulation jobs, or Massachusetts for solar. So you got the residential bucket, and that was fun. They were giving that stuff away. Like the Nest thermostats, they could get that money away.
I got 2 of those.
Oh, yeah, they're great. I haven't had them actually in my home, but I hear they're pretty cool. And mini splits, are hugely popular. I'm based up here in Maine at the moment, and it's awesome technology.
Yeah, or on demand water heaters. We had our water heater replaced, and we decided to do that, and we had a really great incentive. To do that from Massachusetts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Mass Save's got that bucket of money. Other states have that same sort of model. And for homeowners, it's pretty easy. But for the commercial sector, they could not give this money away. They literally were sitting on tens of millions of dollars, just like, hey, take our money, please.
Someone come.
They couldn't do it. They had to explain to these, to their basically the evaluators and to the supervisors who kind of run, these state programs. Like, we really tried, but the fiscal cycles didn't work, and all this stuff. I was like, there's got to be a way to help tell the commercial and industrial sector that, hey, there's free money here. But I quickly learned that it wasn't just a matter of them not really knowing about it, but they didn't have the interest really to risk their own process, I suppose, really, to entertain even getting some incentive dollars for this stuff. Because if you're running a business, you got many expenses that you're worrying about, and then you want to be able to maintain your process reliably.
Right.
So very risk averse, and certainly in cannabis space. It's kind of, I think on the outside, it's seen as kind of a freewheeling and loose and very risky, business.
Not at all.
But no, very conservative actually.
Yep. This is the way we do it, and this is the way we're going. Yep.
Yeah. You see that because you're talking to folks about technology, and hey, we have a different way for you. We have a better approach than what maybe you're doing now. And selling that, I'm sure you've got some resistance. But I'm sure we could talk about kind of your market evolution, over the years. But folks are not super excited about change. So, but I've been working on it, for the past 4 or 5 years in the cannabis space, pretty uniquely, because I see that need. And LED technology is coming along a long way, which is great to see.
Right.
So it's not a matter of kind of pushing like new stuff on folks. It's more like, all right, there's money out here for you to be installing this. And not just that, if you know how to navigate through the incentive process, you actually pay down half, 3/4 more of that upfront cost just by knowing how to engage the utility. So that's what I've been doing. It's been really cool.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And for those who joined, this is Sam Milton, the Climate Resources Group. I have your LinkedIn already queued up. Is that a
Cool.
good thing to put in there,
Yeah,
Sam? All
yeah,
right,
that works. Yeah, for sure.
I'll drop that in the comments if anybody wants to reach out to Sam
Mhm.
as you get to know him over this conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of pushback. I think even in the article, I'm going to share that article that you co-authored here.
Ooh, cool.
So yeah, even in the article, 5 tips to improve sustainability in cannabis cultivation. I think in the very first paragraph, you talk about, in the olden days, or at the beginning, people didn't have to worry about operating expense so much, but now, it was more like capex, but now it's more of an opex type of. Well, I would say depending on what state you're in, it's more of an
Hmm.
opex type of thing.
Hmm.
But people are resistant to switching up their processes, especially when you need to move fast. You're trying to be the first to market in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But you've got 5 tips, and you co-authored this with, who's the gentleman again? Mark.
Oh yeah, Mark Ross. Mark, if you're there, hey, how you doing? Yeah, I told Mark and others that I'd be on this. So yeah, I don't know if he's going to jump in or not. Who knows? But yeah, he's awesome. He's worked with Vincente Cederberg, at the law firm's national law firm, and he, along with Kim Napoli, actually are heading up their ESG practice. So I know ESG is one of these acronyms that kind of floats around out there. And I can't speak exactly to kind of how they approach ESG, but yeah, he's a co-author of mine, so a guy I highly respect. And so I got drafted the piece. I was like, I'm definitely missing a few things, so I wanted to bring him in and help me, fill in some of the gaps. But no, it was a cool article. And it's actually funny, Asia, that you mentioned that first paragraph, because the way that I had initially conceived of this piece was not as 5 tips to improve sustainability, but like if you're not thinking about sustainability, you're leaving profits on the table.
Mm-hmm.
You're leaving money piled on the floor and you're not picking it up. If you're not thinking about your long-term approach to your operation, and so they decided that was a little bit but not really negative, but they didn't like the whole academic approach to thinking about the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of squished that into the first paragraph, and then wanted us to flesh out the tips a little bit more. So anyway, what you see here is like the final iteration of that. So it took a little some turns along the road.
Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned the term ESG while you were, explaining this, and that's, for those that might not know, environmental, social, and governance. And I caught an article on LinkedIn while I was looking at something a couple weeks ago, and whoever it was, they did a really good job at describing the difference between sustainability and ESG, because those two terms get kind of commingled and twisted in together. And it's even something that I kind of struggle with too, is trying to wrap my brain around what is sustainability. But I thought this description that this gentleman put in LinkedIn was great. He basically said sustainability is about how will I impact others, whereas ESG is about how will others impact me, like how will the external impact me. That's ESG. So that could be environmental issues, social issues, or governance related issues that will impact my business. And then sustainable is more about how am I impacting the community, the environment that affects the community, social equity, all that type of stuff. So there's overlaps there. But I think it's always good to try to, you tried to phrase it that way in that first paragraph, the importance that it's tied to the bottom line in your finances, and you're leaving profit behind. But I also like to try, and I don't, some people it connects with, some people maybe it doesn't, but the impact of just not having so much of a risk on your supply chain, just relying on all these external, factors. If you can reduce your energy consumption, or if you can find an alternative to your energy consumption, yes, it saves you money, but it also gives you, you're not at risk when energy prices go, flying through the roof. So there's just such in my opinion, a positive to being smart with our resources, because it reduces your risks from these external factors, and then it also makes sure that you're not, over consuming for the greater community. So yeah, pretty good. But the 5 tips you got, I just want to run through them real quick, and then we can maybe just jump on whichever one excites you the
Can I
most.
actually talk? Can I jump in real quick about the ESG and
Oh yes,
sustainability
please, please,
conversation?
please. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I also did spent some time doing kind of corporate social responsibility stuff, which creates another acronym CSR, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of like precursor to sustainability and ESG.
Mm-hmm.
So they all get kind of confused. But for me, I think about sustainability as the definition. I think it was coined like the early 90s, I believe, during some sort of kind of a UN sort of proceeding, and it was really about how I think I mentioned this a little bit, making sure that there are enough resources for future generations. So, as we kind of think about our work and our existence, are we, leaving, the resources, in terms of air, water, maybe even energy resources, our future generation is going to have, enough to live on, and thrive, and, to kind of follow the lifestyle and quality of life that we all kind of come to expect. So I think of that as sustainability, which kind of gets thrown into the environmental bucket of things.
All right.
And of course, if you're using ESG as the acronym, you've got kind of that being the environmental piece, and then S being social and G being governance. I think kind of the ESG structure is kind of through the lens of investors, actually, and how investors look at different companies.
Yep.
And they use like a filter, an ESG filter, to identify those companies that may be particularly good in any or all of those respects, and the others kind of get washed out.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, just to further confuse things, but yeah, I think I read too had pretty good angle on it, but yeah, it's basically environmental kind of longevity. Kind of what are we leaving the world for our progeny.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you also talk about how investors, insurance companies are going to start looking at these things
Mm-hmm.
um, too. And for me, I think one of the biggest risks to the industry is probably maybe the flood risk, because it spans across so many different geographical territories.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are dealing with wildfire, some people are dealing with earthquakes, people are dealing with hurricane, but almost everybody is to some extent dealing with the possibility of flooding, whether it be from a river or lake,
Mm-hmm.
etc. But right before I left my corporate gig in the commercial property insurance space, and that's where I spent all my time, was just natural disasters, writing engineering guidelines and all that type of stuff to figure out how could we identify what's going to happen. And I was doing this training session where I was putting together some material, and I'd done it before, and I was just updating it. And I had to call the American Society of Civil Engineers, who are in charge of the National Flood Levee Database. So all the levees throughout the country are all kind of managed up and kind of overseen by the American Society of Civil Engineers. They've been doing this for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're supposed to inspect the levees. Like Hurricane Katrina, levee failed. That one got inspected, but when they did more, they found out there were actually bigger issues. So long story short, what I want to get to is, while I was doing that, I learned that randomly they just decided to remove the testing criteria, the testing reports, the results of the testing reports from the public website. You were able to get access to see any levy. I could look at any levy in the world and find out, is it okay or not? That's really great information to have.
Yeah.
As a business owner, as a insurance adjuster, as an investor, someone purchases a property or expands into a new region, and anybody can see, okay, maybe it's in a flood zone, but it's protected by a levee. I need to check that levee. Like, that's the type of thinking that you want to have. We used to be able to see that anyone in the public. They got rid of that in 2019. And I called them and I asked them, I said, I used to be able to tell my engineers to go to this resource. The resource is gone. And they said, well, we're going to put out a press release. Press release never happened. So I just, on top of all this, I just feel that we're in a worse state than we think we are when it comes to, some of the infrastructure that we already have in place.
Yeah.
So kind of thinking ahead and thinking, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, You kind of have to also think about how can I confirm that the infrastructure I'm relying on is good. There's so much. This is just so complicated when a new industry is expanding and coming into the corporate mainstream like this.
And
But
sinking, hundreds of millions of dollars, into infrastructure, into new construction or into, rehabbing, old buildings that may be in kind of in floodplains. So much money going in without being kind of, fully vetted. And that's definitely, I mean, I think a lot of, the work that you do, Asia, or certainly, did in your previous life. And I think to some extent now, where it's going to really kind of help entrepreneurs figure out kind of that risk analysis. I don't know about you, but I think that probably that sort of due diligence that makes so much sense and is really important can kind of get, shunted aside when a builder's got, hey, $100,000, and it's going to cost $101,000 to build the building. They're not going to, pay a single cent for anything that isn't like absolutely critical to getting the building built, right? So yeah, and I hope it doesn't continue to fall kind of in that optional category, because I think I'm doing your homework and doing that due diligence is, I mean, critical to running a business that is that uses investor money and using your own money, friends and family money. I think it would behoove anybody who's like really sinking that many resources into something to check a couple of boxes like, hey, am I in a floodplain? If so, what do I do if there's a flood? Like, gotta make sense to do that math.
And those things typically, people come online once there's a loss or something happens or some sort of unfortunately a tragedy or something. But you learn from those, and then you go, okay, everybody, this is unfortunately what we were talking about, but here's the solutions. And a lot of times, as we can maybe go through some of this stuff, some of the solutions are not that cost prohibitive if you think about them ahead of time, like in the planning.
Totally.
But yeah, so which one of the 5 tips do you want to jump in on?
Well, I kind of put them in chronological order, but I think the where I see folks really kind of making the biggest, kind of missing the biggest opportunity is on their the equipment that they choose, and then accessing all the incentives that are available to them to get there. So I feel like, folks are doing a pretty good job in terms of that. Number 2, utilizing technological innovation. And I think about that, like on the cultivation lighting side, LEDs, as I have mentioned, are gaining traction in the marketplace. They still are not at all, the majority of growers use LEDs, but certainly in veg cycles, clone, I think they're pretty well accepted as a technology that can help folks grow better plants at a drastically reduce operating cost. And I think in the flowering stage, you're seeing kind of greater adoption of that too. But again, that's kind of where there's a greater risk and reward. So if you mess up on your flowering cycle, you have to you kind of really have to start from the beginning. So I would say, number 3, if you go on down a little bit, the savings incentives part is kind of where I think a lot of folks are missing the boat. And this kind of, frankly, a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past, couple of years has really kind of, gained a lot of traction, because it's really about, again, as I mentioned earlier, trying to tap those incentives that your state government and then your utilities put in front of commercial businesses, to install stuff like LEDs, as I'd mentioned, and kind of the other more advanced HVAC equipment. So the programs largely exist. I mean, most utilities around the country, at least the big ones, will offer these programs. And they're not hidden from sight. You can find out about them by visiting their website. You're visiting the website or calling up your utility. But they're often pretty intimidating, and even those utilities that do a pretty good job of marketing the programs, they'll basically give you a form to fill out, a 1-page thing. How many lights are you buying of this type? And then say, okay, send it in, and we'll give you a check for whatever that is. based on their own kind of predetermined formula with their own predetermined set of assumptions.
Yeah.
And you get that check like 6 months later. That's one way to do it. But what I like to do is work through the custom programs where you say, okay, and this kind of gets to, if you do it right first, it's much more, it's a much better deal for you than kind of, doing it, kind of maybe trying to catch up after it's built.
Yep.
But if you do it in a new construction phase, you're looking at the entire design and engineering, and take kind of that, not quite blank slate, but at the 75% completed version, take that to utility, and well, actually, what we can do is model the savings out from that hopefully more advanced, more energy efficient setup, using LEDs, using advanced HVAC, and through modeling, kind of compare that to a real dinosaur of a facility, and through that process, we can really dramatically expand the amount of incentive opportunity that somebody can get. So there are different ways to do it. So you can do like the quick and easy way, or you can do like the deeper kind of the engineering way, which we like to do, because folks can really get paid nicely that way.
Yeah, and I assume you would get more. You'd get more bang for your buck in regards to reducing that operating cost when you do that more extensive review, because you're identifying all these other things that you probably would have missed if you just sent the paper in yourself.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that's kind of part of the modeling that we do. So it's funny, I glossed over the modeling part, but it's not just an instrument to hand the utility, to get the biggest check, but it actually does tell the designer and the owner, what are some of the opportunities that might be being missed within the specs of the equipment that they're getting installed. Because we do an energy model, which basically says, this kind of gets to the first point to some extent, but does the equipment that's to be installed, does it actually meet the needs of the grower, of the operator? And we can tell pretty quickly if the design kind of reflects an actual emphasis towards performance, or one just on on cost savings, upfront cost savings. If it's the upfront cost savings, then there's probably not a whole lot we can do, because they're basically going to be starting with not a great facility, but you can, without spending a ton more money, get a dramatically better and more efficient facility, one that not only uses less power, but that actually also improves yields. Because you're an engineer, Asia, right?
Yep.
The more dialed in your facility is, the more you're looking at the data coming out of those grow rooms, you can be smarter about the outputs that you're going to be getting. And that's kind of what this is all about. Like, are you being kind of thoughtful and structured and data driven in your approach to the business?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's awesome. And can you talk? I'm assuming like every state's different, like you mentioned. And we're running out of time, but I just have this one other question. For like the new states that are coming online, New York, New Jersey, how are they handling this type of thing? Do you see more of an awareness at all there, or is it similar to how it was the first few years in Massachusetts?
It's funny, because I've actually, being an energy policy person, paid a lot of attention to the regulatory development in Massachusetts and in other states. And now kind of watching how New York and New Jersey, as you mentioned, are following up. And I know they've talked to the folks in Massachusetts. I know that Massachusetts, is one of the only states, maybe next to Illinois and California, that specifically mentions energy and sustainability in law and regulations.
And gives kind of limits, right? Is that 31 watts?
Yeah, exactly. 36 watts per limit, per 36 watts per square foot for tier 2, port 3 and above growers. So that basically says, all right, you can only use a fixture that is 650 watts maximum, basically, for a 4x4 footprint.
4x4. Yeah.
And so it's like, either CMH or LED. Or you could do like a checkerboard maybe. But no other state really, prescribes the lighting power density of a grow room. I mean, it's a concept that exists in kind of office lighting, for example. But it's so weird that the state decided to do this in a cultivation space because it's an industrial process, right? I mean, it's an actual input in an industrial process. So it was interesting and a little bit out of the box that the state did that. But I mean, Massachusetts, they don't, they take this stuff seriously. And I think really the reason why the CCC, and they were pushed by the Department of Energy Resources for this rule, and why they went there is because the state had been sued maybe 10, 15 years ago because they weren't meeting their commitments to their own carbon reduction commitments.
Oh, wow.
So the state had said by 2025, I think we're going to be reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by, what is that? Basically reducing by quarter, from 1990 levels by 2025. And it's going to be 80% by 2050. And so some organizations, sued the state and say, hey, you're not following up on this. So that was pretty fresh in the minds of the regulators and of the governor's office. And they're like, we've gotten sued for not holding up our commitment, to this. So I think that's really kind of the reason why, the 36 watts per square foot rule got in place. So it just goes to show that, policies that are put in place, years ago to solve a problem, sometimes actually have real world implications. And I think the jury's still out, if that created perverse, incentives for growers to do other stuff, or if it actually resulted in a greener Massachusetts cannabis industry. We don't quite know yet.
We don't know that yet. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, we're looking for data though. The CCC should be sharing energy use data that they get from the industry, but we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and I mean, who's kind of spearheading that data capturing and delivery to the governmental agencies, because they're not developing their own system for that, or are they asking for cultivators to just give them something, or how are they?
They are. In the regs, they require cultivation applicants on the renewal application to submit basically it's called a cannabis power score. So the cannabis power score is actually a proprietary tool developed by a nonprofit organization out in Oregon called the Resource Innovation Institute. They're good folks. Actually, they have.
I donate to them.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Are you a member or throw money?
Soon to be, but awesome. not quite yet. Yep.
Yeah, they're a great group. I did some work with them early on the policy piece, just kind of tracking different states and trying to weigh in where we could. But they developed this cannabis power score tool, which is free to use. And the way that works is that a cannabis cultivation owner and operator uploads data about your energy use, water use, their productivity. And then for Massachusetts requires those cultivators to basically send that report to the state. And if you're a grower that wants to go above and beyond to get real granular insights into your performance, then you can do that. But the state actually requires by regulation that they receive a copy of that report.
A power score.
Yeah. And so the CCC is ostensibly collecting these and doing data analysis, I think in conjunction with the Department of Energy Resources. But it seems like there's some sort of kink in the machine now. And I'm not sure what's going on with that, but we're pushing that because ultimately what I want to do is, I think a lot of my colleagues and your audience members, they want to have a greener cannabis industry, right? Nobody wants to be invested in an industry that is blatantly polluting the planet. Right. We all want to make it better. So it's just a matter of, what are those tools and levers that can do that, and incentives. And that's why a big part of what I do is to help my cultivation customers, receive the incentives that the utilities put out there, in order to be more efficient, right? So we'll get there. We'll get there. It's a bit of a it's a grind, but I think we're close.
Yeah, well, I mean, for those that might be listening on the recording or live, if don't leave the money on the table. Reach out to someone if it seems overwhelming. Sam Milton's there to help
Yeah.
you with that. And yeah, Sam. So you're gonna also be what's coming up for you next? Where can people maybe see you speak or any other articles coming out?
Yeah, well, I do a mostly monthly webinar series. It started out being in person, then it moved to Zoom, and now I'm actually trying the same platform that you're using right now
Mhm.
to basically connect cannabis entrepreneurs with industry professionals who can come in and share insights and kind of tips and kind of workshop different ideas. So we do that. About once a month or so. We had most recently a discussion about time of use rates. So as power billing thing, we have a lot on folks' mind right now is energy costs going way up, like everything else, right?
Yep,
But
yep.
electricity costs are going up. So what are some of the challenges, opportunities that people have to reduce their energy costs?
Great. So
We'll be
that's
having, yeah, it's really cool. So Leafy Seminars is the seminar, I guess, name. If you Google Leafy Seminars, you can find information about it.
okay.
And we hope to be having a session on solar next. And then after that, what can growers do inside the grow room to kind of optimize for energy
Excellent.
and the resource use? So stay tuned for that. And then, going to Vegas in August for this Cannabis Business Times conference.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on a panel with actually the director of the Resource Innovation Institute and a few other folks. We'll see. But yeah, that should be a ton of fun. I've not been to this Vegas show before, so
In August.
period. In
Yeah,
August, yeah.
in August. Woo.
It's a dry heat, right? It's the desert, so
That's true. Yeah,
I'm
it is
sure
a
it's
different type
lovely
of heat.
at night.
No, I've been there in August. It's not too bad. It's not
Yeah.
too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but cool, excellent. Well, that's where people can connect. Your LinkedIn is already in the chat. Please
Awesome.
connect with Sam in that manner as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam, for coming through, sharing that insight. I look forward to seeing what you're gonna be doing next. And I need to figure out. I need to get your Leafy Seminars coming through my feed or something like that. So please, if you remember, invite me so that I can see.
Yeah,
that coming
totally.
through.
I'll sign you up to our list.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's it. We'll be back next week. You can stick around, Sam, or it'll be a couple minutes while I say goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, we'll be back next week. We'll have another special guest on next week, talking about some Trella related updates, etc. But like I said before at the beginning, please check us out on Thursday, 8 p.m. We're going to be doing our live pitch, 45 minutes with a Q&A session. And yes, if you are interested in talking to me or one of my team members about climate risk and that climate action part of your ESG programs, reach out because we're going to be looking at some things that maybe some other people aren't looking at for you when it comes to natural disasters. But yeah, check us out at Trella.io. And everybody, we will see you again next week. Mad peace, mad love. Thank you.